I was very clear at the beginning.
It's Lindsay Hoyle again.
And I mean that my constituents to hear it. If yours don't, please leave. Keir Starmer.
Does the Prime Minister have any idea how much mortgages are going up by this month for those coming off fixed-rate mortgages?
Prime Minister. Well, again, I'll just point him back to my previous answer, Mr. Speaker, as I went him through. Everyone's situation will be different. As someone on a typical mortgage of around £140,000, who's currently paying £800, will be able to keep their mortgage payment essentially the same by using the facilitations that the Chancellor has put in place. But again, that's what we've done to help people, Mr. Speaker. But again, it's incumbent on him to explain to the British public how his policy of decarbonising the grid by 2030 is going to be funded. He won't give the answers, but helpfully, the Shadow Energy Secretary popped up at the weekend in an interview in the Sunday Times. He said they don't need a plan to pay for it, Mr. Speaker, because in his words, it will produce real savings and it makes clear economic sense. Now, the shadow leader here doesn't want to talk about it at all, but let me tell him, I see all these years later, it's the same story. The Right Honourable Member for Doncaster North has carved a promise in stone, and everyone else just looks away in embarrassment.
Oh, that takes me back, the Edstone.
Yeah, still going strong.
Still going strong, the Edstone, in people's minds. Good use of the word facilitations from Rishi Sunak, which is not what I've heard in the comments for a long time. I can sort of see what Keir Starmer's driving at, but it feels a bit... He's somehow made like a real-life issue feel a bit technical and knotty.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's like your reaction when he says, what is the cost of someone coming off a fixed-rate mortgage? Now, well, it depends if they're going on to another fixed rate, what that fixed rate is. Are they going on to a standard variable? There isn't an answer. So I sort of have some sympathy with Sunak on that one.
And again, he's just actually given Rishi Sunak an opportunity to repeat the government scheme that's been put in place.
Yeah.
And then go on the attack after Ed Miliband again. Lindsay Hoyle popping up there to tick MPs off. Actually, before PMQs even got going, he apparently told MPs to exercise restraint, saying recent exchanges have been lively to the point where it's becoming difficult for colleagues to hear what is being said clearly. There's been an escalation and unhelpful exchanges across the floor of the House from sedentary positions, he means people sitting down, and the attempted use of props. Is it becoming more of a problem, or was it just been getting more Lindsay Hoyle than normal?
It's normally, a little bit.
You normally watch in the gallery rather than over here.
Yeah, I'm not sure it is. It's the Hoyle is particularly bad on this, but Bercow was bad either. It's almost as if, it isn't PMQs unless they've stood up several times and told people to quieten down. But most people are watching it on the television, and that's not particularly obvious. It's more obvious in the chamber than if you're watching it on TV.
Yeah, because actually the truth is we can always hear because the people speaking have got microphones on. Yeah. So more's the pity sometimes. Right, let's go back to the House of Commons then. We are going back for question. Is Keir Starmer going to ask again about how much mortgages might go up by? Question number 4.
Mr. Speaker, he just doesn't get it. They crashed the economy, mortgages skyrocketing, doubling the debt. They say they're going to max out the government's credit card at the next budget, and he won't.
Order. I think the Chief Whip's getting very carried away. He doesn't want to lead everybody for a cup of tea, does he? Come on.
They have forfeited the right to be lecturing others about the economy. Somebody coming off a fixed-rate mortgage is going to be paying an average of £240 more each and every month. A constant reminder that working people are paying the price for the damage that they've done to the economy. This week, I met one of the employees at Iceland in Warrington, Phil.
Quite a long pause again.
I'm sure Phil would be...
Lindsay Hoyle's...
Mr Gibson. Sorry.
Lizzie Hoyle
Mr Starmer.
is up again.
Order.
It's not totally clear what's happening.
The same voice keeps appearing again. It won't appear anymore. So I'm just letting you know now. Keir Starmer.
It was Simon Hart, the Tory Chief Whip, who was telling us
laughing at an
before.
employee at Iceland who's struggling with his mortgage. Shame. He told me that his mortgage is going up by a staggering £1,000 a month, Prime Minister. He doesn't want other averages, other people, other stories. That's what's happening to him. If the member for Mid Norfolk on £120,000 can't afford this Tory government, how on earth can people like Phil?
Well, actually, Mr. Speaker, thanks to the management of the economy, Phil and millions of people like him are now ensuring that inflation is less than half of the rate that it was when we were talking a year ago, putting more money in their pocket. And thanks to this government, Phil and millions of other workers, not just at Iceland, but across the country, are benefiting this month in their pay packet for a tax cut worth hundreds of pounds for someone on an average salary. But I hope he explained to Phil the cost of his policies. Did he explain to Phil
Poor Phil,
how
he's been
Phil is
dragged
going to
into
have
this,
to pay for his £28 billion green spending spree? How it's going to cost Phil in higher taxes, more coming out of his pay packet? And did he explain to Phil that he'd be better off sticking with our plan rather than going back to square one with him?
Poor Phil. There he was, working in Iceland, minding his own business. Keir Starmer comes in, and now he's been bandied about at PMQs. I think Lindsay Hoyle there was ticking up. He said Mr. Gibson, so I think that might be Peter Gibson, Conservative MP for Darlington, who's been told off for shouting. But clearly, Lindsay Hoyle's on the warpath on that. What will Phil make of all of that, do you think, Ollie?
He'll be perplexed, won't he? I mean, and interestingly, that neither Keir Starmer nor Rishi Sunak also talked about Richard from Iceland. Now, Richard's a bit different from Phil, because Richard obviously owns Iceland.
Yeah.
And Keir Starmer's been helping Richard, because Richard wanted to be a Tory MP, and the Tories weren't keen on Richard being a Tory MP. So now Richard wants to be a Labour MP, and he's backing Labour.
Yes, Richard. Does he actually want to be a Labour MP? He thought it's only a matter of time, isn't it? We had Richard from Iceland on earlier this week, Richard Walker, and I pointed out to him that it was only after the Tories declined his interest in becoming a Tory MP they decided to switch sides. And then he talked about the cost of living, because Keir Starmer had been at Iceland talking about the cost of living. And I asked him, I think it's fair to say, several times, if he could point to a single policy that Labour had that would help with the cost of living. He talked in vague terms about inflation. We went round and round several times. He ended up landing on a crackdown on shoplifting, which would stop, if there was less shoplifting, prices might not go up to cover the cost of the stolen. So right. I wasn't fully convinced that he was on board necessarily with all of the detail of Labour's new economic plans. But there we are. Did we find out from Keir Starmer how much more mortgages were going up by? I'm not sure we did we?
We did. We got a figure.
We got a number. Yeah. Oh, there we are. Right. So who's winning this one? Is it Phil? There's George Freeman's name has been thrown about, the member from Mid Norfolk. He's the former minister who couldn't pay his mortgage. Is Phil in Iceland going to make yet further appearance? Let's go back to the House of Commons now. It's question number 5 from Keir Starmer.
I would invite the Prime Minister to get in touch with Phil and explain to him how paying £1,000 more on his mortgage is making him better off, because that's not how he feels. He's just so out of touch. It's unbelievable. Finding hundreds of pounds extra a month, that may not seem like a big deal to the Prime Minister. But let me tell him, most people don't have that sort of money knocking around. And if that wasn't bad enough, Mr. Speaker, this week he told every council in the country to put their council tax up by the maximum of 5%. That's 26 tax rises now, Prime Minister. And he says everything's fine, people are better off. But when people see their mortgages going up, their council tax going up, food prices still going up, who does he expect them to believe? His boasts or their bank account?
Minister! Well, Mr. Speaker, again, I was puzzled because, again, he resorts, as always, to the politics of envy here. But after recently and repeatedly attacking not just me but the government for lifting the bonus cap, I was genuinely surprised to see that the Shadow Chancellor just today has announced that she now supports the government's policy on the bankers' bonus cap. I don't know if he mentioned that to Phil when he was having a chat with him, but I'm sure he can fill us in. But I can tell him that trust and economic credibility come from sticking to a plan, but it's becoming clear you cannot trust a word that he says. And again, when the Shadow Chancellor says or claims that they won't borrow much, they won't raise Phil's taxes, we now know that those promises simply, again, they just aren't worth the Wikipedia page they were copied from.
Oh. I mean, not a bad joke, albeit one that's about 5 months late.
Yeah.
So that was about how Rachel Reeves wrote a book about pioneering women.
And
And it turned out quite a lot of it had come from Wikipedia. And the Tories really tried to hammer the copy and paste shadow chancellor, which didn't really take off. Poor Phil. I mean, everybody is going to be trying to find Phil. Phil's going to be he was I just showed Keir Starmer where the chicken nuggets were. I didn't realise that my life.
I have to tell him my life story.
Phil, if you're listening and you want to get in touch, or if you know Phil who works, where is it? Is it Darlington?
Yeah, Iceland.
Iceland, Darlington. Was it in Darlington? Have I made that up? If you're Phil from Iceland, or if you're any Phil, maybe you're listening in Iceland. 87222, start your message with the word Times. Do get in touch in the usual ways. An audacious move by Rishi Sunak to turn Keir Starmer's attacks on his personal wealth into the politics of envy.
Yeah, and to bring up the banker's bonus as well. I'm not sure that does any favours to anyone. I think most voters would be equally annoyed with what the Tories have done on the banker's bonus as they would with Rachel Reeves. Although, to be fair, there were quite decent arguments as to why you should get rid of the banker's bonuses, because it just encourages banks to pay people in other ways which are less productive. But it's not going to be a vote winner for either the Tories or for the Labour Party.
And clearly Rachel Reeves just smuggled that out this week, hoping that no one returns to it. How do you? We've only got one more question left on it. How do you think it's going so far?
Oh, I think Sunak deserves credit for weaponising Phil.
Yeah.
I think, Starmer comes in with Phil, but it's Sunak who comes back with Phil this and that and the other, which is, quite good sort of improvisation on his part.